Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today for the Center on Global Energy Policy's Columbia Global Energy Summit, our 7th annual summit. My name is Jonathan Elkind, and I'm a senior research scholar at the Center on Global Energy Policy. In this session, which will flow rather naturally from the preceding session with the Nigerian Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, in this session, we will focus on the theme of energy for development around the globe. As I say, there are points of intersection with what many of us have just heard from the Vice President, but there, of course, will be additional topics as well. This event is being webcast live. The full video will be available online later today at our website, which you can find at energypolicy.columbia.edu. For those of you who are joining us using Zoom, you can submit a question for us at any time by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We live in a world that is facing, candidly, many deep challenges on numerous fronts. A global pandemic that is ravaging many parts of our world, persistent poverty and income inequality in many countries, including my own, social and racial injustice, and steadily emerging threats from a warming climate. This is a world in which roughly 800 million people lack access to electricity, and more than 3 times that number lack access to clean cooking. And these are pre-pandemic figures. I do not know, as we speak this morning, whether these figures are still accurate or now a considerable undercount, perhaps. Addressing this humanitarian gap is not just a core part of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, not just a formalized multilateral target, if you will. It's also a matter of human decency, a foundation for forging a more secure and stable future. But none of that makes it simple. And so for that reason, we are extraordinarily fortunate today to have with us one, and I hope a second, extraordinary leader who will be able to discuss with us the challenges, the opportunities in regards to energy for development. Ms. Damilola Ogunbiyi is Chief Executive Officer and Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All. She is also the co-chair of UN Energy. She serves as a commissioner for the Global Commission to End Energy Poverty. She also serves as co-chair for the COP26 Energy Transitions Council, about which we will hear more, I suspect, as we proceed. She's also a member of the Development Advisory Council of the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, or DFC. And previously, she has had a series of senior executive positions, including serving as the managing director of the Nigerian Rural Electrification Agency, the first female to hold that role, and also has served in positions in the federal government of Nigeria, as well as the Lagos State Electricity Board, where she was the first female general manager. So we are extraordinarily pleased to have you with us today, Damilola, and we also hope to have Dr. Vera Songwe join us. I do not see her on the line at present on the wire. So we will proceed with the program. And again, Damilola Ogunbiyi, welcome. We are absolutely delighted to have you with us. And let me ask, if I might, just to kick things off, for reactions, observations that you may have in regard to the comments by the Nigerian Vice President Osinbajo. Welcome, and your thoughts, please.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for having me here today. I think there were 3 words that really stood out with what the Vice President of Nigeria said. His Excellency mentions equitable justice and inclusiveness. And as we work on what our energy transition, that must be it. My job, my only job is to make sure we achieve SDG 7, which is kind of affordable and inclusive energy for everybody with leaving no one behind. And to enable this, we have to look at each country, at each locality and say, what is the way they are going to develop their energy transition? We know that in Africa, at least in sub-Saharan Africa, most of these energy discussions we have is actually also a climate discussion. So for me, the key point of, apart from it being inclusive, equitable, and justice is for everyone to realize that we cannot achieve our climate goals if we do not achieve energy access by 2030. And bringing those two into the same conversation is really critical, that energy access is part of the energy transition story.
Thank you. Could you expand a bit on the point, the essential quality of the energy access, energy for development? It seems that this is a point that we gloss over, I would say, in many cases in advanced countries. But we've gone through these developments ourselves in order to provide opportunity and economic poverty reduction, opportunity for people across our workforces. Talk a little bit more about the link between energy for development and the achievement of climate goals.
Okay, I think the important point is that when people think about energy access, they always think about the minimum level of energy. They always think that because people don't have access to energy now, it means that, a solar lantern will be fine. And in some cases, a solar lantern might be fine for what you use it for, but it shouldn't be considered as electrification. What we should be focused on is energy for economic growth, energy to actually take people out of poverty. So we're not going with the vicious cycle of aid and then after aid and after aid funding as well. We know now that if you provide sustainable energy for a woman entrepreneur, she can actually earn 59% more than what she was earning without energy, right? We know that it's the only way. You can't actually get out of be economically prosperous if you are still energy poor. And it's just, I think it would be good for me to just put it in perspective when I talk about energy poor. What we are saying is that apart from South Africa and North Africa, the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, which is 1 billion people, only have 81 gigawatts installed capacity. Installed, that's not what they produce. So to put it in perspective, to look at it in another dimension and maybe break it down to what people understand now is, let's say, crypto. Everyone's been talking about crypto mining, and most people we know are invested in crypto in some kind of way. Crypto mining, I think as of last year, accounted for 130 terawatts of hours of power, right? That is the same level, that's 5 times the amount of power as a country like Nigeria actually produces every year. Right? So if we take Bitcoin as a continent, as a green continent, that means Bitcoin alone could provide 59 gigawatts of installed capacity if it was run by solar, which is almost on par of what 1 billion people have to use, right? And we know it's not run by solar. We know it's run by other different types of, fossil fuels as well. And there's no attack for them to go green from day one. There's the attack of saying, how are we going to transition for this? But I think, when we talk about energy poverty and how bad things are, it's important in that context. Another context to look at it is what's happening with COVID, what's happening with vaccine. If on the continent you have only 24% of your primary healthcare centers having any electricity at all, when you are administering a vaccine to save hundreds of millions, maybe 1 billion people, where do you administer it? And that's why when we talk about this, we have to look about cooling, clean cooking, and electrification, and not just be in this little kind of bucket of just energy access means giving people the minimum amount of energy.
Thank you. That was excellent. And I'm going to try to come back to cooling and some of the other points as we proceed. I've just gotten a message indicating, unfortunately, that Dr. Vera Songwe, who we had hoped would be joining us, has been detained at another event that she is participating in today. Her colleague, Jean-Paul Adam, is apparently with us, and we are pleased that you are with us. Jean-Paul, thank you for standing in for Dr. Songwe. We'll bring you into the discussion here as we proceed. Let me just say that for those who are watching online, again, my name is Jonathan Elkind. I am with the Center on Global Energy Policy, and I am pleased to be here with Damilola Ogunbiyi, the Chief Executive Officer and the Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All. And we will come to you, Jean-Paul Adam, to introduce yourself in a moment. We are discussing the global energy, the global agenda in energy for development, and we will in due course open up to questions from the audience. For those of you who are joining us via Zoom, you can submit a question for the panelists at any time by clicking on the question and answer Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So let me ask, if I may, Damilola, a question to you about the SDG 7, the 7th Sustainable Development Goal. And then, Jean-Paul, I'll come to you with a question as well. The SDG 7, I think it could be said, occupies a kind of a foundational role for the leadership post that you are in, Damilola. It calls for affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all by 2030. Now, interesting, the interplay there between the energy access, energy for development themes on the one hand, and the clean energy transition themes that we've been discussing through the morning already. It calls out 3 targets. 1, ensuring universal access to affordable, reliable, and modern energy services. 2, increasing substantially the share of renewable energy in the global energy mix. And 3, doubling the global rate of improvement in energy efficiency. Now, obviously, these are extraordinarily profound and serious challenges. How are we doing? How is the progress coming in terms of moving toward the 2030 goal? How would you assess where things stand?
To be very honest, we are not on track. We're not on track for providing power to 800 million people who have no access to electricity at all, of which 565 million of those happen to be in Africa. We're not on track with the 2.8 billion people that have no access to clean cooking, of which about 900 million happen to be in Africa. We are getting better in terms of our renewable targets, but that's still off track. And the energy efficiency targets too, unfortunately, are not on track. And this is very important, like I said earlier, because this is almost like the foundation and the golden thread that holds all the SDGs together. You can't have the right health outcomes, even gender outcomes, agricultural outcomes, if you do not target what you're doing in energy and have the energy that's sufficient enough for you to allow you to do all your other SDGs for it to thrive. And that is why, especially this year, we have a high-level dialogue on energy, which will be the first time the UN is meeting on energy in 40 years. Which is also to show kind of the large gap between energy and climate. And what we want to do is put that together and say, look, energy has to be part of a climate discussion. Energy access has to be a firm part of the climate discussion. The other reason, I guess one of the key other reasons to make sure we move on this issue, and I think His Excellency, the Vice President, also touched on it, is the funding involved. We need roughly, well, according to the IEA, anything between 25 and 40 billion a year, every single year, to even tackle this issue. And this could be anything between, private, public funding to look into that. And then for me, I think one of the most important parts, which we are really, really pushing as sustainable energy for all, is the use of data. We have to be able, at a country level, to be able to say, how many people don't have electricity? What is the best way to electrify them? What is the best way to provide them clean cooking? How does that translate into their energy transition plans in line with Paris? People just assume that a lot of these countries have this deep data and this, this information. And a lot of times it doesn't come like that. So it's really important for us to create like an energy market within those countries, to look for ways investment can come, to make sure that these energy systems that we're putting in place is actually sustainable. And it's not just for a year or 2 or 5 years, or you connect a customer and all they get is 2 hours of electricity and you tick on the box that yes, you've connected the customer. It's not just about connections, it's about sustainable energy. And yes, as I said before, we are not on track, but this year is critical to get back on track. And I feel that this is what COVID has shown us, right? We have more governments saying that they want to be sustainably responsible, they want to move to clean energy, right? But we have to respond with the funding and with the tools to allow them to do that.
Thank you very much. Many points there that I'd like to come back to, but could I please first call on you, Jean-Paul? Sustainable Energy for All is and UN Energy take a sectoral focus at looking at the objectives of SDG 7, whereas if I understand correctly, the UN Economic Commission for Africa, with which you are affiliated, takes a geographical focus on SDG 7 and other SDGs. Could you just give us a word, please, of explanation about the function of the Economic Commission for Africa and your perspectives on how we are doing in regard to SDG 7 within the African continent?
Thank you very much, Jonathan, and greetings, Damilola. And first of all, our sincere apologies on behalf of Dr. Vera Songwe. She is currently participating in a summit which is happening in person in Paris on finance for African countries, which includes, for example, unlocking finance for the energy sector. And unfortunately, as happens sometimes in these events, they run over, and she has been unable to liberate herself in time to be able to connect. So our sincere apologies that she can't be with us, but she would like to express her absolute support for the goals of this event. So the UNECA is an organization which has been established to support the policy goals of African countries to achieve sustainable development. So we look at all of the sustainable development goals, and we work with all African countries supporting their ambition. And I think you very rightly, Jonathan, highlighted that SDG 7 is the foundation SDG, or we could look at it slightly differently by calling it a platform SDG. It's the foundation because if you're going to build infrastructure of any kind, you require good energy access. And if you're going to be able to deliver in terms of your socioeconomic goals, have achieved the health outcomes that you want, achieve the education outcomes that you want, and we've seen that really very dramatically in the context of the pandemic, where schooling in Africa in particular has been disrupted because where schools have not been able to bring students in and not being able to have remote options, and largely it has been because of the absence of electricity. So the access to affordable, reliable electricity is the number one priority in terms of unlocking the other sustainable development goals. And this includes as well about creating wealth, because I think Damilola mentioned this, you need to have access to electricity to be able to form a small or medium enterprise and to be able to invest in terms of a better outcomes for yourself and for your family. And we've seen around the continent that when you invest in energy access, it has the largest multiplier effect in terms of job creation and in terms of the value addition opportunities that are created throughout the economy. Now, the very, very good news is that renewable energy has become cheaper and more accessible, and it also actually provides more jobs and more multipliers in terms of value addition than fossil fuel-based energy. But in Africa, we're starting with a very, very low base. And the picture is different in different countries. It's important that we recognize that there's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all, but in many countries, the base generation is extremely low. You may have, in some countries, as less than 10% of the population have reliable access to energy. And so one of the key things is really building up that base generation. And that's what SDG 7 is about. It's ensuring everybody has access and everyone has equal access to to electricity.
Thank you very much for that, Jean-Paul. Damilola, could I come back to you just with one more follow-up on the SDG 7 frame in particular? Can you characterize, and here I realize that I am asking a question that covers just, tens and tens of different countries around our globe, but can you characterize in general, how has COVID impacted progress? You alluded to, in some ways, refocusing on the objectives, but we have seen in energy statistics and in investment statistics and in poverty statistics some very very negative trends. How would you sum up, how would you characterize the impacts on the SDG 7 work plan overall?
Well, I think it's twofold. I think we can't shy away that it's brought us backwards. If you hear of IFC figures of 150 million people going back into extreme poverty, that's not happening in the global north. So I think we can be firm on that, and we confirm that some of the things are actually are going to get worse, and energy is going to be the most hit. A lot of progress we had made in the decentralized energy space will go backwards if people can't pay for electricity because they have no money because they're stuck at home. It's really that basic, and because the subsidy levels and the stimulus is not the same as provided in the developing countries as it's provided in the developed. But on a more positive note, which I always like to look at, it's the first time you hear countries saying they want to recover better. It's the first time countries seeing that energy is the way, not necessarily about climate, but about economic growth, higher GDPs, jobs, and that's what we should focus on. How do we help countries recover better and have energy as the most important thing to allow them to do that? And like I said earlier, give them the tools to make it happen. You would not have heard 3-4 years ago some countries removing fuel subsidies. You would not have heard some countries, like I said, like the vice president said, saying I'm going to provide power to 25 million people using solar energy, right? That is all because a disaster like COVID has happened and is still happening. And we have to look at the positive and hang on to that and make sure that becomes the new normal instead of, instead of going back to business as usual, which we can all admit did not work. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you. Let me shift, if I may, to one of the big international efforts that are underway at present to look at the Energy for Development agenda. The Global Commission to End Energy Poverty, which I know both you, Damilola, and Vera Songwe participate in, was created in 2019 by the Rockefeller Foundation and Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And as I understand it, aims to develop an actionable consensus among leading investors, utilities, and policymakers to lay out a viable pathway for providing electricity services to hundreds of millions of underserved homes and businesses more quickly and more cost effectively than the current trajectory. So as somebody who worked with one of your co-chairs in that commission, Ernie Moniz, in a previous life, I see lots of familiar Moniz indicators there, consensus, the emphasis on the practical, on consensus building, on tackling big tasks, and on moving faster toward important objectives. But could I get you to please say a little bit about this commission and how does it work? How do you help to identify opportunities to accelerate, in particular, the flow of capital to meet the objectives that the Global Commission is pursuing?
I mean, one of the key things about the Commission, which I'm honored to be part of it probably has the largest group of influential people in the energy space that really, really understand how you implement large-scale energy projects on ground. So it's not this theoretical exercise that you sometimes get. Another point about the commission is that it has a fair share of advocacy, but it has a share of what to do on ground. And you might have heard about this. Something that's come out of it is the Rockefeller Smart Power Global Initiative, where it's Rockefeller really putting their money where their mouth is and saying that we are going to put a sizable amount of philanthropical money to guide and to risk mitigate tens of billions of other money coming in. And I think this shows when we talk about what is the clean energy offer, and things like this coming from philanthropies like Rockefeller also puts the DFIs and other people on the spot, because this is what everyone should be doing. So I'm really excited to be part of it and be a partner with Rockefeller on this. And I'm sure you're going to be hearing some really exciting things, and that is focused on clean energy. But the other thing that Rockefeller is doing is also speaking to heads of states and going in countries and understanding the unique nuances of what it means to work at scale and speed in these different countries. So I think that's what the difference is. It's not just coming up with something in New York and DC and then trying to implement it in South Asia or in Africa or in Latin America. It's understanding the needs of that country, knowing that you will get the political support to come into those countries, and then emphasizing scale and speed. We have too many of these really tiny projects, and like I'll give you my background in the REA of Nigeria. You're looking for billions, at least hundreds of millions as well, and people are coming to you with 500,000 technical assistants. That's not going to cut it. That's not going to allow you to thrive, and that's not allow you to definitely meet your 2030 goals. So what SPX is doing is kind of speeding up that process and showing people, and back to what I think, creating the market for investment. Which is what would make things sustainable. And I'm really looking forward to, I guess, the big final launch, which will happen at COP this year.
So in that context, I'd like to ask you a little bit about some of the challenges and some of the tools for mobilizing capital at scale. Blended finance is a term that one sees a lot in relation to the challenges that we're talking about today. Africa has lots of entrepreneurs, including some very important industrial groups and finance houses. There is also lots of engagement, similarly in other parts of the world that are trying to contend with the energy for development challenge. There is still an important role, I think, that is to be played by finance from other countries as well, whether that's the DFIs or other. Can you talk a little bit about how you see the finance challenge, and is there a particular role that can be played by blended finance in this context of energy for development?
Well, there's always a role for blended finance, either to bring the rates down, to be more important. But I think what the challenge is, and I'm going to speak in the African context now, is also access to local currency financing. You can't peg everything with the dollar, especially when you're trying to provide power to the most vulnerable people. Tariffs can't change because the dollar has changed. So one of the things we're really pushing is what are the risk mitigation instruments that you can use to provide local currency debt, and obviously get repaid based on local currency. There are subsidies in my country, Nigeria, in place by the World Bank, but obviously you need funding for the private sector as well. You want the funding to come at a certain percentage as well. So it's not just kind of, when people think that you just have subsidy, it's not just about subsidy, it's about how you create the market for the private sector and hopefully develop the local private sector to be able to come into these tools. You have private sector who can access money that, have raised their Series A, B, C and everything, and people recognize, but that's fine. But you have to also develop the local businesses, like you said, lots of amazing local entrepreneurs that could work at scale if they were given access to these platforms, right? So one of the things that we also look at is how rigid is it to access finance right now? You know, if you're asking someone for a 5 years audited report, it's not likely that, you know, there's only going to be like a handful of companies in Africa that can give you that, because solar and renewable energy is quite new. But if you ask for 2 years, how does that change the landscape? What are the things you can introduce? What is the role for the local commercial banks? What is the role for the pension funds? What is the role for, you know, all these different institutions to work with the DFIs? And something that Smart Cloud Global is doing is a concerted effort working with the DFIs as well and co-creating. So it's not that, you know, things come out and people say, oh, we don't understand this. It's that we've all come together to co-create this instrument, but we have to move quickly and we have to move at scale. And for that, nothing happens without funding and accessible funding in local currency.
Great, thank you. Jean-Paul, I want to bring you in if you have thoughts or comments on the topics that we've just touched, and then we'll shift on to a next question. Jean-Paul.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. And firstly, relating to the work of the Global Commission, I think one of the really interesting things that it brings to the table is looking at energy access in a very integrated form. So I think a lot of development practitioners tend to look at energy from the perspective of, oh, we've now reached a phase where renewable energy investment is straightforward and it can be led by the private sector. And there is a huge role for the private sector, a huge amount, and perhaps even the majority of the investment going forward will come from the private sector. But it does require appropriate startup positions and support from governments. And this is even more so in Africa. And it's not just also on the generation side. So, for example, the Commission has put a lot of emphasis on the distribution networks and transmission networks, which are often forgotten. And the Rockefeller Foundation has done some very interesting work, for example, in Rwanda, on supporting them in developing a plan for investment. But we still have the challenge of channeling investment from the private sector into these areas. The private sector tends to look at investment in generation and looking at how they can then recover that investment by linking with consumers. And that's not always straightforward in Africa. So you need this startup element, which comes to the responsibility of governments. In the current situation of COVID-19, governments have very little fiscal space to be able to invest themselves. And we need to find ways whereby funding can be available for governments to structure these base investments that allow the wider investments in energy. Then, as Damilola mentioned, I think there's a big role for reducing the cost of finance for private sector investment. Some of the areas that the Economic Commission for Africa are working on together with the IMF has been around creating a repurchasing facility or repo facility for African countries, which would make African bonds a lot more liquid, with a focus in particular for using this additional liquidity for investing in energy infrastructure. And I think that links as well with creating the opportunity in local markets for local financing and building up the local private sector for investment in the energy sector.
Thank you very much. I'd like to turn to a question that comes from the audience. If I might address this to you, Damilola. The audience question is, how much do the energy access opportunities in Africa link to the liberalization of energy markets? Let's generalize that question a bit to enabling policy environments. I know from past conversations with you and hearing your various interviews that this is another piece that SE for All is focusing on, the enabling environments. Could you talk a little bit about the significance of that side of the equation to incent investment at scale?
Sure. I mean, let's just be honest, you're not going to get large-scale investments or large-scale subsidy programs from the likes of the World Bank and the AFDB without clear regulation. But it's not, I guess, an onerous task anymore because there's so much regulation out there. So if it's a mini-grid regulation or an off-grid regulation, it probably exists. And I think what our role is to show people what is the best practice regulation so you can implement. You know, a lot of some countries don't even have regulators. What do you do then? How do you set up their regulatory, boards or facilities? How do you set up their implementing agencies to be able to cope with it? But, different countries are at different scales. Because countries don't have regulation doesn't mean they don't have energy, they shouldn't have energy access, right? So you have to look at what do you do just at the beginning. Back to my background in Nigeria, we did a bunch of pilot projects to even show government that solar works. It was 10 years ago, and it seems a bit ridiculous now, but sometimes you just have to do something before you evolve. And what we're trying to say is that some countries are in the convincing stage of what they should do with their energy mix. Some other countries have regulation, and some countries, like let's say India, have developed markets, and it's more about innovation and technology. You need to understand which stage each country is and understand the tools that they need to progress to the next stage, instead of having this kind of, perfect scenario, because it just doesn't exist, that perfect regulations, perfect regulator, perfect team on ground, perfect implementing team, all the developers all in the same place at the same time, all the local banks ready to finance. That's a scenario that doesn't even happen in the global north. It's not going to happen in the global south. And I really want to emphasize that effort, right? Every country should be giving a fair chance, and you should understand what they currently have, and you need to advise them how to make things better. It's not for you to say, oh, they don't have regulation, I'll come back to you. And that's very, very important.
Sounds like a strong premium on the ability to diagnose properly and then creatively, appropriately to improvise and to tailor offerings to requirements. If that's a fair paraphrasing. Let me, if I may, turn to another aspect that I know, or issue that I know that Sustainable Energy for All has been focusing on lately, and that is the challenges around cooling. In a warming globe, the need for cooling not only will presumably expand from the need for cold chain treatment of food, medicine, et cetera, but in a very menacing way, additional requirements for space cooling as populations deal with additional heat burdens on them, on their livelihoods, on their homes. SE for All has recently been focused on the cooling challenge. Are there key messages, takeaways that you think that our audience should focus in on in regard to this question of cooling in the sustainable energy for all context?
I mean, there's lots to take away, and I really hope everybody goes and reads the Chilling Prospect report. But I guess I just want to leave you with one note. Some people see cooling as an inconvenience, just like how they see energy access sometimes, but they don't realize that is the difference between life and death in many, many people and many scenarios, right? So the minimum level of cooling, let's just say a fan, has to be incorporated in whatever you say is energy access. The minimum amount of cooling in terms of your need for vaccination has to be incorporated as you think of your primary healthcare centers. It's very staggering for me that people that haven't experienced extreme heat are saying, do we really need air conditioning? Do we need it? Well, the truth is we do need it. What we're trying to say is that these air conditioners and this equipment need to be energy efficient, right? Because they will last longer, they'll be more efficient, and on the long run, you will save money doing it. But I think we just like everybody thinking of cooling part and parcel of this energy transition that we're talking about. And just, the need for it, like 2020 was the hottest year on record since 2016. We don't know what this year is going to bring. It's getting hotter and hotter and hotter, and the solutions are not matching up to what we have to deal with. So I think that's just kind of like, for me, that is the message I want to put across to everybody, that energy efficiency and cooling is part of the transition, and it affects people in ways that it shouldn't affect, and we need it to have healthier human beings.
Thank you. Let me just ask a quick question to each of you. This is stemming from one of the questions that has come from the audience. The audience member asked, how does nuclear power fit into your activities, your objectives? I'd like to generalize that. How does Sustainable Energy for All, and how, for that matter, does the Economic Commission for Africa think about technology choice? You spoke a moment ago, Damilola, about the heterogeneous nature of different countries at very different stages. Does SE for All take a position on which technologies countries should employ?
Well, our stance would always be renewables first. You know, that would be what that would be our go-to, and that's what we think is most sustainable. But we have to understand that people are transitioning as well. And it might not be easy to go from, I don't know, coal to renewable overnight. So we do understand that, but what we are trying to get into is a net zero future. And I feel that when we talk about technologies, we need to take a step back. And this is what I was trying to talk about, the use of data, right? You really need to form energy transition plans for each country to understand what their energy mixes are, when they continue using it, when they're going to stop using it, or when they're going to transition into something else. If you don't have that base data, I think it's hard for you to just assume any technology is best for any country. So it's hard for me to answer without the data. And that's why these great regional plans are great to give a regional outlook, but it doesn't speak to what is happening in country. Again, a perfect example we are seeing in terms of some energy transition plans. When we thought that the power sector and the industrial sector were the largest pollutants, we're finding that it's actually land use from deforestation and clean cooking. You know what I mean? So, you know, without data, you just make assumptions that are incorrect. And with data, you can make assumptions to get the best type of technologies, understanding the cost of the technologies as well. And, you know, almost have your best plan B as well as you look into it. So it really has to be tied into the data. But our default would always be renewables.
Excellent, thank you. Jean-Paul, do you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, thank you very much. We start from the same position that renewables is the first option. And there's, of course, the climate advantages in terms of the reduced emissions. But perhaps more importantly in the African context is that the work that we have done, the analysis that we have done has shown that you get better job creation through renewables, as well as a bigger multiplier effect through your value chains that are linked to renewables, and the ability of African countries to benefit from those value chains. So we would not necessarily be against nuclear. I think, as Damilola has said, for some countries it might make sense because you might need to have a very big investment in your base generation to be able to invest elsewhere. And for some countries it would be gas. You might need to invest in gas. If you have a very low base generation and the battery technology is not there, you might need to have something like that. But renewables, the core argument is that it's better for jobs and it's better for your economy more widely.
Well, thank you. That's a good note for us to conclude on. I want to thank very much Damilola Ogunbiyi for taking the time to be with us today, and I no less thank Jean-Paul Adam for jumping into the breach when the circumstances required it. As I mentioned earlier, the full video recording of this event will be available on the website of the Center on Global Energy Policy later today, and the link to that has been put in the chat that you will be able to see, audience members. Our next session in the 7th Annual Columbia Global Energy Summit will focus on the Biden administration's climate agenda. It will be held at 12 noon Eastern Time today. For a full calendar of upcoming events, visit the Center on Global Energy Policy online, and we hope that you have a productive remainder of your day. And again, our sincere thanks to you, Damilola Ogunbiyi, and to Jean-Paul Adam. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.